Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Derek here, and welcome to week one of the SysOps Admin Associate exam. Okay, this is a slightly more advanced exam. If you are coming in from the Cloud Practitioner exam, it's going to be more in depth, but this does assume you, in fact, have that Cloud Practitioner exam and at least some familiarity with the popular AWS services, the core ones that are commonly used that you'll be working with a lot. But we're going to take a different point of view now in that we want to, learn more about what a SysOps admin actually is and the perspective you should be taking when you sort of step into that role in the professional world, okay? And how you can best prepare yourself to have the necessary skills and experience to blend in with that role right off the bat once you do, get that job, okay? So in week one here, we're going to do, of course, the quick intro so we get familiar with each other. We're also going to talk about some exam tips and the psychology of taking exams. If you've taken my Solution Architect's guide or any of the other guides, that's going to look familiar. It's the same strategies for taking a test, but obviously the details differ depending on which test you take. And then we're also going to look at the exam format overview of this particular test, so the 6 domains that make it up. And then again, we'll just look at, what is a SysOps admin and what is the sort of mentality you should be undertaking, stepping into this role and getting ready for this exam, okay? So, again, my name's Derek. I'm 3x AWS certified. I've got some others in Azure as well, but for AWS, I've got the Cloud Practitioner, Solutions Architect, and SysOps Admin Associate certifications. I am currently a support engineer working with enterprise resource planning applications, and also in another company that my company has, I also do some Azure SysOps admin work as well. I am a AWS community builder with about 4 years industry experience, and I write a bit on medium.com at this link here if you want to just read more, maybe in other domains besides SysOps admin or see some other labs, whatever. Just cloud computing in general, check that out. And all info in this guide has been triple checked for accuracy. So it's been double checked by myself and checked again by an independent party to make sure that we have completely accurate information in this guide as of the time of creation and review, obviously. If things do change, the guide will be updated. So as of the time of this lecture here, everything is up to date. All right, so the objectives for this guide are to get you over-prepared for this exam, okay? We don't want to chase perfection. That just leads to anxiety and you're just never happy, never satisfied. But at the same time, we want to do more than just enough, okay? A passing score is about 720. We want to make sure that we're getting, at least 800, right? So we have a little room for error because you're going to get questions wrong. That's just the way it is. So we want to make sure that we are a little over-prepared so that we can feel confident walking into the exam, knowing that we've done everything we needed to do and it's not going to be a problem, okay? You want to gain an understanding of implementing cloud initiatives. We want to gain some experience deploying, managing, and operating workloads on AWS, as well as implementing continuous security controls and getting up to speed with compliance requirements, which is extremely important if you're working in any respectable business or organization. You're just going to have security protocols, so it's best to know best practices. And then we want to become more familiar with the AWS console and the CLI. So if you've done the Cloud Practitioner and or the Solutions Architect, you're pretty familiar with the console, but the command line interface of the CLI is a tool that's going to make things much more efficient once you kind of become familiar with it, to manage your resources and make changes and update things and get the status of your resources and all that. So we're going to get quite a bit of experience with the CLI as well, which will be pretty neat. And then we're going to gain a deeper understanding of the well-architected framework. So AWS has really hammered out just infinitely amounts of scenarios, for workloads, issues, errors, whatever, and they've come up with their well-architected framework and their best practices. So we would be wise to try throughout our full time as cloud professionals to adhere to those best practices. Okay? All right, so the psychology of test taking. So the number one inhibitor for better test scores is test anxiety. Because it inhibits your performance when you actually sit for the exam. Okay, practice exams are helpful and you want to mimic taking the test as much as you can, but once you're actually in that room, locked down, out of your environment, taking this test where it matters, we can maybe feel a little anxious. But this generally comes from a few sources. So just outright not being prepared, if you know that you haven't done the work, then you're going to feel anxious because you're not sure if you're going to be able to pass, because you don't know what's going to come at you that you don't know, that you didn't study for. So do your best to prepare. Again, don't be perfect, but you should be aiming to do your best. Excessive pressure to succeed. So, thinking, I have to pass this test, otherwise it's over. All right, otherwise, maybe it means I'm not smart, or this isn't for me, or whatever. It's fine. It's just a test at the end of the day. Okay, it costs money, a decent amount of money, so we want to make sure we pass it the first time, which is the aim of this guide. But, we're not going to stress ourselves out too much, because on the off chance that you fail, it's not the end of the world, and you'll at least have some mistakes to learn from, which is ultimately how you really improve. Comparing yourself to others, there's always going to be someone who knows more than you. That's just the way it is. If you're comparing yourself to others, then, and they're better than you, they have been in the industry for 10, 20 years or whatever, then yeah, you might feel unprepared and it won't feel good. And similarly, if you compare yourself to others who are below you, who don't know as much as you, okay, well then maybe your ego is going to be inflated and you're not going to want to study as much. Right? You're not going to want to really do the work to be over-prepared because you think you know enough because someone else doesn't know as much as you. Okay, that's not the case. So compare yourself to you and really just, again, try to just continuously do your best and improve. Okay? And then lack of sleep, don't do this. Sleep isn't just for the weak. Whatever, that's some kind of misconception and myth that I wish would go away, but it's still a thing. Sleep is extremely important for memory, for performance, for your energy levels, for mitigating stress, a host of other things. We're not here to talk about human physiology, but, before I worked in IT, I was a strength and conditioning coach for about 7 years. So I've got some experience in that realm. So just take my word for it. If you get good sleep, then you'll feel better, you'll perform better, you'll remember more, okay? So, what are some things you can do to mitigate this test anxiety? Okay, how can you feel better sitting for your test and actually taking it? Well, we can do our best to find a consistent area or environment to study. So maybe it's a home office, maybe it's kind of the same library with the relatively same table in the same section. Maybe you have certain types of music or a window you're looking at that has natural light, whatever it is. Try to keep it as consistent as possible so your brain doesn't have to think about your environment. It can really just focus on the material and the task at hand, okay? So use the Pomodoro technique. This is one of the foundations of our training programs, and what makes them so efficient is that we're not just going to sit here and hammer this out for hours and hours on end, trying to just burn ourselves out to remember everything. Okay, we're going to take breaks to allow our brain, and our mind to decompress and give it a chance to catch up and really process what you've learned. Okay, so what that normally looks like is about a 15-minute period of focused work, a 5-minute period of rest, relaxation, just letting your mind wander or whatever. And then we come back and we repeat that a few times, and after about an hour's worth of that, we take a longer break at about 10 to 15 minutes, okay? It's very important. At first, it's going to feel like you're wasting time, but stick to it, and I promise it's going to work. There's a ton of research behind it. Go ahead and look it up for yourself if you want. So stay up to date with the course syllabus. So if you fall behind, right, if you scheduled your test this week in week 1, and it's now week 8 or 9, your test is on week 12, but you've only done like 2 or 3 weeks worth of work, then, well, you're, again, not going to feel prepared. You're not going to be prepared. You're going to start cramming. It's going to stress you out. It's not good, so don't do it. Stay up to date, stay on track, do the work, okay? It's not always fun, but it's very important if you want a better career, okay? Take practice tests. So again, really try to mimic the test environment. So give yourself time limits. If you can, try not to have like music or anything like that because you won't have it during the actual test. Don't get distracted, or really just sit for it, because when you're taking the test, you can't get up and move around, walk around, whatever. You can still take breaks though. You can just chill and hang out and decompress for a few minutes, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, take practice tests to simulate the real test to see how prepared you are and get used to that environment, okay? Proper sleep, exercise, and nutrition habits. Again, we're not going to go into too much detail about this, but I'd recommend Andrew Huberman if you really do want to up your physiological state and level of preparedness. But just in a nutshell, proper sleep, try to get 6 to 8 undisturbed hours, exercise, try to break a sweat, and nutrition, drink a lot of water and don't eat junk, okay? Try to avoid as much sugar as you can. That's some good foundational keys right there, but again, if you want to dive down that rabbit hole, go look up Andrew Huberman, okay? And finally, again, we are going to have an over-prepared mindset. So when we walk in to take that test, right, you walk through the testing center door, you look over your testing station where you're going to be taking your test, the proctor sits you down, gets you all logged in, you're feeling good because you did the work and some, and you're ready. Okay, you're not in a perfection mindset. You know that you're going to get a few questions wrong. That's totally okay, because you've done enough preparation to ensure that you are going to get enough questions correct and get that passing score, okay? Nobody asks you, hey, what kind of score did you get for your certification? No, they just want to see that you have it and that you're competent, okay? So all we need to do is pass. We're going to make sure we pass and some, all right? So some general tips to pass the exam. Study and take your test using the Pomodoro technique. So we're coming up on our next break. We'll probably do it after the slide here. Our first break, rather, so you'll kind of get a feel for how that works. But you can also do this for the tests, right? So, when you're sitting in your testing room, of course, like I said, you can't get up and walk around. But, you could just, like, sit back. You could just, like, maybe kind of look around, whatever, move your arms. Just kind of hang out, Don't read questions. Don't think about questions, but just sit here. Just sit here and relax for a couple minutes after, about a 15, 20-minute interval during your test. And you'll have that timer up there that's going for your test, so you know kind of what your intervals are, or you have like an idea at least. So really utilize that, get used to using it. It's going to be one of the best ways that you can get through this material and remember it, okay? Exercise, break a sweat. Again, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but exercise is more than just getting fit, getting in shape, losing fat, whatever. It helps with stress relief. It makes your sleep better. It helps you be more productive. Okay, it helps balance your hormones, which again will inhibit stress, right, and help you better regulate it. It's got a whole host of benefits, right? If somebody tells you that exercise isn't good for you, they're out of their mind. I don't know what to say. Okay, it is. Doesn't mean you have to kill yourself every time you train, but even just going for long walks. Don't have to be anything crazy, but get out there and move. Aside from that, when you're actually taking the test, you can generally rule out 1 or 2 answers that just don't make sense, don't belong. After going through this guide, you'll have an idea of what those answers are just because contextually they don't fit the question. Okay, there's just something obviously wrong with them. All right. Then you want to pick out 1 to 2 key words in a question, right? So a lot of times, as the next point alludes to, there's going to be maybe more than one right answer, but you want to find the best possible solution, and those keywords will help you do that. So say, for example, you have a requirement to provide the most cost-optimized solution, and you've got two answers that both will meet the performance needs of the solution, but one's cheaper than the other, okay? Because it specifically asks about cost optimization, then you want to choose the answer that, again, will work, but it's going to be cheaper, okay? Be careful of answers that have always, never, and manually in there. All right, always and never are strong words. There's rarely a use case where something is always or never the solution. And then manually, especially as a SysOps admin, we want to try to automate as much as we possibly can. Okay, so try to avoid doing things manually. 99% of the time, you're going to want to steer away from any kind of manual operation. All right, the day before your test, chill out. Don't do anything. Don't try to cram. Don't review. If you don't know it the day before the test, you're not going to know it. Okay? And you're just going to stress yourself out by looking at things. Oh my God, I forgot this, did that, whatever. Just chill out so that you can go into the test feeling good, feeling confident, feeling relaxed, like you're going to pass. Okay? And then again, just remember the pillars of cloud computing, so that you can kind of lean on those and keep in mind when trying to find the best possible solution, these pillars, and really try to fit whichever solution you're leaning towards into these pillars and see if it makes sense. So again, we've got operational excellence, security, reliability, performance, efficiency, and cost optimization. All right. So real quick, just scheduling your AWS test. Ideally, you would do it this week. Set it for 12 months from now. 12 months, Jesus, you don't need that long. 12 weeks from now, which is going to be about 3 months. And you can schedule this at either schedule to take it at a testing center or at your home. I recommend a testing center because at home it's weird. You got to install this weird software on your computer and have a camera where someone's watching you. You can't look around, can't move. It doesn't feel right. So if you can do a testing center, I'd recommend that. And upon passing, you will receive a discount on your next exam you take, which is pretty neat. And it will also renew your certification at the lower tier. So when you pass this, it will renew your cloud practitioner certification. And you can schedule your test by going to www.aws.training/certification. All right. So let's go ahead and take that first break for about 3-4 minutes. And when we come back, we will go ahead and look at the domains you'll be tested on and give you an overview of what exactly a SysOps admin actually does, okay? All right, welcome back. Let's go ahead and carry on with talking about the 6 domains that you are going to be tested on. So domain number 1, and this percentage here, by the way, is the percentage on the test of questions that will make up this test from each domain. So for example, this first domain is going to be 20% of the questions. This one's going to be 16%, whatever. And as you can see, it's a pretty tight spread. So all these concepts are for sure equally important, okay? So the first domain is going to be monitoring solutions and applications and using logging to then remediate issues. The second domain is going to be attaining high levels of reliability and business continuity. So just making sure things are running all the time as expected. Then we have deployment, provisioning, and automation. Security and compliance is next, fourth on the list, but obviously very, very important. Networking and content delivery, and finally cost and performance optimization. Okay. So just real quick, what you will not be tested on, this is similar to the Solutions Architect Associate kind of list here. Coding, development, and actual dev tools themselves, not on here. Internet of Things, AR, VR, machine learning, not on here. One thing to note, and you guys are actually lucky at this point, because I had to do labs when I took this test, but the in-exam labs as of March 28th, 2023 are actually not in here anymore. So again, lucky you, you just get to stick to multiple choice questions. You don't have to actually do labs. I had to. It was fun, but obviously it's quite challenging. And then there's other random services on here that we will not cover, okay? So if we don't cover it, you can bet it's not going to be on the exam, all right? All right, so domain Number one, we have monitoring, logging, and remediation. So this involves implementing metrics, alarms, and filters with AWS monitoring and logging services. We are going to look at remediating issues based on these monitoring and availability metrics that we set up and implement. And the main services that are going to be used in this domain are CloudWatch, EventBridge, CloudTrail, Config, Trusted Advisor. So again, guys, when I say main services used, I don't mean only services used. Okay, there's definitely some overlap here, but for each domain, these are the primary ones you're going to want to keep in mind. Okay. Domain 2, reliability and business continuity. So implementing scalability and elasticity so your workloads can grow and shrink with your business's demand. Implement high availability and resilient environments. Implementing backup and restore strategies for those worst case scenarios. And the main services used here are going to be things like auto-scaling, your Elastic Load Balancers, Route 53, your Elastic File System, Elastic IPs, Data Lifecycle Manager, and snapshots for various things like EVS volumes and RDS databases, for example. Okay, domain 3 is going to be deployment, provisioning, and automation. So we're going to provision and maintain cloud resources, automate manual or repeatable processes. Okay, again, we want to automate as much as possible, that operational efficiency domain. And the main services used here are going to be AMIs, CloudFormation, OpsWorks, which definitely, guys, note that OpsWorks is a legacy service because in May of 2024, it's actually going to reach its end of life. But, you know, there's a chance that it'll ask you a question or two on the test about it. So we're just going to brush over it. But because it's being retired and replaced with Systems Manager, we're not going to dive into too much detail about it. Okay? So, yeah, Systems Manager is going to be the replacement for that. Config, EventBridge, and then SQS, SNS, which are used together so often, I just put them on the same bullet point. Okay? So domain 4, security and compliance. We want to implement and manage security and compliance policies. We want to implement end-to-end data and infrastructure protection strategies. So encrypting things at rest and encrypting things in transit, okay, to their end destination. So main services used here are going to be IAM, CloudTrail, Trusted Advisor, Config, KMS, Key Management Service, Certificate Manager, Secrets Manager, and then I just like to call this the security bundle. So GuardDuty, Inspector, Web App Firewall, and Shield. Just kind of standard services that you should be running and using in any kind of live production business account or application, okay, or environment, I should say. All right. Domain 5, networking and content delivery. So we've got the implementation of networking features and connectivity. So things like VPC endpoints. We've got configuring domains, DNS services, and content delivery. And then troubleshooting network connectivity issues. So some of the main services used are VPC, Systems Manager, CloudFront, Route 53, and S3. And I should note too, guys, that, you know, again, we're going to use things that are kind of subsystems of this. So for example, VPC has VPC flow logs, it's got subnets, security groups, things of that nature. These are just kind of, this is just a broad overview of what we're going to touch on and really get into once we start to talk about each of these domains, okay? So domain 6, the last but certainly not least domain is going to be cost and performance optimization. Any kind of business needs to have track of the books, saving money where they can, not spending money unnecessarily. So we're going to look at some cost optimization strategies and how to implement performance optimization strategies as well, so we kind of get the best of both worlds. So we'll be looking at tags, which is kind of the bread and butter here of cost, Trusted Advisor, Cost Explorer, and budgets. Okay? So let's look at just an overview of what a SysOps admin does and what your mindset should be, approaching this particular role in exam. All right. So, some key concepts to remember are that a SysOps admin is responsible for overseeing both the initial implementation and the continuous integration of solutions and applications. So everything from project start to deployment and the ongoing maintenance and updates of it, that falls under the umbrella of a SysOps admin, right? System operations is what SysOps stands for. You need to understand business objectives along with the different cloud technologies so that, again, you can achieve the highest level of operational efficiency and bring the most value to your business using cloud technologies. Okay? You're going to need to understand how to gather and interpret logs because things are going to go wrong. Maybe you can't connect to something or something's broken, not responding. It's just going to happen. So you need to understand logging and what it's telling you, how to nail things down and solve problems quickly. If you were to understand some networking concepts like DNS, TCP/IP, firewalls, whatever, that will be very helpful because we'll be talking a lot about that, when we actually take or go through this guide, rather. So if you're not too familiar, that's fine. We'll get you up to speed, but some experience there would definitely help. And it's important to know that a SysOps admin works with multiple departments, such as development, maybe your user interface and design, and sales, and really any other department in the company to act as the glue that holds the projects together. And it's similar to DevOps. So that's a word you see a lot of, but DevOps is sort of helping push things out, testing things, quality assurance, things of that nature. So SysOps admin is kind of the glue that makes sure everything is up and running and just holds the ship together. Okay? So some SysOps admin principles in regards to AWS in particular is that you want to, for this certification anyways, focus on the implementation of cloud initiatives. Okay? Excuse me. Long night. You want to use AWS practices as your guiding light. So if you're ever in doubt, just remember what AWS best practices are. So, for example, implementing multi-factor authentication for users, principle of least privilege, things along those lines. And if you have some of the following, it will certainly help you pass this exam. Okay, this is actually from AWS themselves. So experience working in a system admin role, of course, if we're looking at SysOps admin test, system admin role is going to be helpful. Experience with AWS technologies. You've probably got the cloud practitioner certification by this point, and hopefully you've done some labs as well, so that should check that box. On-premise IT experience and understanding of mapping on-prem to the cloud. When I was starting out, I didn't have a ton of IT experience in regards to on-premise systems. I still don't, but conceptually, again, knowing how the concepts of IT work, like networking and security, is going to be helpful, even if you don't, have that physical real-world experience. And if you've worked with another cloud provider like Azure or GCP, that's going to be helpful too because the concepts are very similar. But maybe the lingo and the service names and definitions and their inner workings are going to be different. Okay, but conceptually, it's pretty much the same. All right. So let's actually just take another quick break, and then when we come back, we will actually go ahead and we'll finish up this week's section, and then we'll also real quick look at the syllabus to get a preview of what is coming up and what you should expect from this guide. So let's go ahead and take a break for a few minutes, and we'll be right back. get back into it here and finish up. We probably got about 10 minutes left, guys, so hang in there. We're almost done with week 1. So the well-architected framework, we're going to do a quick overview of each of these 5 pillars because it's just very important to know from a high-level overview. But as we go deeper into this study guide, we'll actually, elaborate on how some of these best practices are incorporated with this framework. Okay? So operational excellence, this is probably the most important one for a SysOps admin to keep in mind. Okay? Operational excellence is the ability to support development and the running of workloads effectively, so building them and actually running them, while continuously improving processes to deliver a business of value. So it's not just like, setting up an app, cool, here you go, now it's running. We want to continuously monitor, update, and improve it, okay? Security, we want to protect data, systems, and assets using multiple layers of security. Reliability is a workload's ability to perform its intended function correctly and consistently when it is expected to. So it should be reliable in that it's there when you need it, okay? Performance efficiency is the ability to use computing resources efficiently to meet system requirements and to maintain that efficiency as demand and technologies evolve. So you want to have just enough resources to fully support your applications and workloads, but not have excess resources that you're not using, but you're still paying for. Okay? And then cost optimization is the ability to run systems that deliver business value at the lowest price point. So basically just don't pay for things you don't need, you're not using. Okay? All right, so the AWS global infrastructure, this is very important to review and understand as a SysOps admin, because the global infrastructure is really what helps AWS and cloud computing achieve high levels of resiliency, availability, fault tolerance, everything that fits in that basket. So the global infrastructure is essentially what makes the cloud possible, okay? It's the physical network of computers, servers, cables, buildings, warehouse space, etc. around the world that you pay to use when you provision resources. Right? So provisioning things, it doesn't just materialize out of thin air. You still need hardware, but that's the whole point of cloud computing, right? You don't have to deal with that hardware. AWS does. You just build things on top of their hardware, right? So AWS global infrastructure consists of the following. We've got regions, things like US East, EU, Europe West, Asia Pacific 1. It's a geographical location that's comprised of data center clusters. And as of January 2023, there are currently 31 active regions. Okay? Availability zones are one or more physical data centers within a region that have their own power, networking, and connectivity to each other within that region. Okay? And we're going to look at a graphic here in a second that'll have this all make more sense. And then finally, you've got edge locations, which are just individual data centers that are in very crowded areas used to cache copies of data, for faster delivery to end users. So this isn't some place where you actually provision resources. This is only used for things like CloudFront, Lambda Edge, a couple other services, but essentially they far outnumber the amount of availability zones. And basically AWS just goes to data centers in crowded areas and says, hey, we want to use this data center for some of our capacity. And they say yes, because you'd be out of your mind to not want to work with AWS if you own a data center, okay? Or any, provider like that, Azure, whatever. All right? So, to visualize this, we have a big blue square here. Sorry, like a piece of pepper floating around in there. So we've got a region, which is the big blue kind of square looking thing here. Okay, so let's just say this is US East 1. Within this US East 1 region, we've got 3 availability zones. I think actually in this particular US East 1 region, there's 5, if I remember right, 4 or 5. But for this example, there's 3, okay? And let's just say this is availability zone 1, 2, and 3. Each availability zone is, like we said, comprised of clusters of data centers. And all of these availability zones are connected with low latency, resilient fiber, so actual kind of hardwiring connecting each other so they can communicate with each other and work with each other, but at the same time, they are also independent, right? And that's what contributes to fault tolerance. So say you've got an application in this US East 1 region and it's running in availability zone 1 and it's running in availability zone 3. Now say there is an earthquake or some kind of natural disaster, power outage, I don't know, that takes out availability zone 3 down here, okay? Well, all of a sudden now you've only got half the availability of your application, which could be a problem, right? If your business requirements, need the extra resources here, okay, well, what are you going to do? Well, you can simply shift your resources from AZ3 into AZ2 and keep running like nothing happened, right? It's great. And then if you need to, once this comes back online, which again, AWS is going to take care of extremely quickly, okay, you can switch this back if you want. But again, you don't have to worry about any of the hardware. Now imagine if this was your own data center and you just lost it in a fire, for example, or like a water damage or flood, whatever. Well, there goes everything, and you got to buy new servers, set them up again, reconfigure them, restore, backup. Hopefully your backups on your other data center didn't get all messed up, so you don't have to worry about any of that with AWS and cloud computing, okay? And the concept is the same, in terms of regions. So this is US East 1. If I were to take a copy of this picture, put it over here, it'd be US East 2. You can have multi-region deployments where if, this entire region fails for whatever reason, you can still have all of your resources running in a completely physically, geographically separate region, so nothing happens and you're still good to go. Okay? So that is, from a high-level overview, what the global infrastructure looks like. Again, since we can't actually use edge locations to provision resources, they aren't on here, but just know that they're, again, everywhere in all sorts of major cities. Okay? All right, so this is the end of week 1, and this is also a preview of what we're going to do in week 2. But speaking of previews, let's just go ahead and look at the syllabus so we know what we're doing. So week 1, we just finished. We're going to do the intro. Yeah, the format, exam format overview. We just did that. We don't need to talk about that. Week 2, we're going to look at compute and drill down into that, looking at things like auto-scaling and load balancing. And then as we go from here, each new week is going to start with a brief review of the previous week, so we don't just learn things and immediately forget them a week later. So we'll review the previous week and then we'll add in new material. So this week is going to be storage management and configuration, databases next week, followed by networking, followed by automation and optimization. Then we're going to touch on monitoring and reporting, security and compliance, cost management concepts, and then we're also going to look at some common errors for popular AWS services. So as a SysOps admin, again, one of those domains is monitoring for errors and remediating those errors. So we're going to look at some so that if you get asked about them on the test, you've seen it before, you know what the cause is, you know what the solution is, okay? And then in week 11, we're going to review some definitions of popular services, things you can expect to see on the exam. And then this also gives you a preview of the labs that you'll want to be doing, okay? Once this is actually finalized, these labs may change, but this is just a good idea of what you can expect to see week to week. And finally, in week 12, if you didn't schedule the exam for week 12, just retake some of the quizzes, and then aim for a higher score on those quizzes, and then review the summary of each section that's at the end of the section. Okay. So that is the end of week 1. Thank you for making it this far. And we will see you in week 2 where we look at some compute.